I invited my son Ethan and his fiancée Emily over for dinner. The table was set with care. Candles lit, dishes arranged, the pink linen napkins I had been saving for a special occasion. I thought that evening would be the beginning of a new chapter for our family. When the conversation turned to their wedding, I asked simply, "So children, when will the celebration be?" Emily put her fork down. She looked me directly in the eye. Her lips curled into a smile that was not warm but sharp, deliberate. "We got married yesterday," she whispered. And Ethan, my only son, stood there silent beside her, as though her words had been rehearsed between them. In that instant, everything collapsed. The dress I had prepared for the wedding, the envelope with money folded neatly inside, the dream of a photograph where I would stand smiling next to my son, all of it became useless, discarded in one breath. That night I opened the closet. The pink dress hung like dead weight, its satin catching the hallway light without warmth. The new shoes stood beside it with their paper still stuffed in the toes. In the top drawer lay the white envelope I had sealed the day before. $1,000 counted twice, edges aligned, my handwriting careful across the front. For the beginning. Now it was the end of something else. I touched the envelope and felt nothing but the thin pulse in my wrist. I sat on the edge of the bed and said the numbers out loud, because numbers do not lie. 4 years and $44,000. I listed them like inventory month by month, the way I used to tally groceries when money was tight in 1998. $800 for the deposit on their first apartment. $500 again when a roommate vanished. $900 for new tires after Ethan called from the freeway shoulder, voice tight, saying he would pay me back next Friday. Friday never arrived. There were couches and lamps and a coffee table that wobbled until I paid a handyman. There was the winter they forgot to plan for utilities, and I covered the gas bill 3 months straight. There were groceries, always groceries, because they were eating clean, which somehow meant salmon on weeks I measured my own rice by the tablespoon. I remembered dates the way other people remember songs. June 12th, the Venmo alert at 11:07 p.m. Emergency. September 3rd, the transfer memo, car repair. January 14th, I wrote a check for $600 to a mechanic I never met. March 28th, I ordered a mattress because their backs hurt. I saved the receipts in a blue folder labeled household, as if my orderliness could one day stand up for me. Even before the secret wedding, there had been small humiliations. Emily stepping aside when I reached to tuck a curl behind her ear. Ethan going quiet when I offered to host a Sunday lunch, his eyes sliding past me to the window. Messages that began with "hey" and ended with totals. I told myself this was how families grew, awkwardly, with patience. I told myself love was endurance. Around midnight I made tea and could not drink it. I placed the cup beside the envelope and stared at both until the candle burned low. Their voices from dinner repeated in my head, soft and rehearsed. "We got married yesterday." I went back to the closet and touched the dress again. I had chosen it because the color made my skin look less tired. I imagined the photograph I had been waiting for. My hand on Ethan's sleeve, my smile small but real. That image dissolved like breath on glass. I lay down without undressing. The ceiling fan ticked. In the quiet, the math kept returning. 4 years, 44,000. That was a used car. That was a year of nursing school I once denied myself when Ethan was 5 and needed speech therapy. That was the fence I never replaced after the storm because Ethan and Emily needed a security deposit. I had swallowed my pride the way people swallow pills, with water and a steady hand. I had told no one. At 2 in the morning I opened my phone and scrolled through bank alerts. The screen glowed hard white. Transfers, memos, confirmations. I saw my own name repeated like a witness signature. I thought of the day last winter when I stood in a pharmacy aisle comparing generic acetaminophen to name brand, because they had asked for help with a dental bill. And I decided my pain could wait. Love means choosing, I told myself then. By 3, the house felt like a museum of misused hope. The guest room held the crib I had kept just in case. The pantry held bulk rice, beans, and a case of tomato soup, because they liked soup when they were saving. On the refrigerator there was a list titled Wedding Week, with tasks neatly checked off. Hem dress, pick up shoes, confirm photographer, prepare envelope. I ran my finger down the column and felt embarrassed by my handwriting. Just before dawn I went outside in my robe. The air was thin and cold. Somewhere a delivery truck braked, a dull squeal and then silence. I stood on the porch and let the night finish. When the first weak light widened the street, I understood what the useless things had become. The dress was not clothing. The envelope was not a gift. The shoes were not shoes. They were proof. They showed me the border I had crossed again and again, smiling, paying, waiting at the edge of a life I had financed but did not inhabit. I went back inside and put the envelope in the freezer behind the peas, where I keep what must not be lost by accident. I closed the door and pressed my palm to the metal. There I thought, if there is a future, it will not be purchased with this. A week passed in silence. I avoided the phone, ignored the familiar pattern of numbers that always appeared at the same hour, and buried myself in small routines, watering the plants, wiping the counters twice, folding the laundry that barely filled the basket. I waited for the silence to mean something, but it was only silence. Then one afternoon the phone rang. The name on the screen froze me where I stood. Emily. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, but my own hand betrayed me. I answered. Her voice was trembling, pitched too high, the way people sound when they have rehearsed sympathy but cannot hide the fear underneath. Susan, we cannot pay the rent. The landlord says he will change the locks. You have always helped us, please. The same woman who had looked me in the eye and declared her marriage behind my back now spoke as though I were her last defense. Her words pressed on the old wound, but instead of pain I felt something new. An ember of anger, small but steady. I said nothing for a moment. The silence stretched so long I heard her swallow. Susan? Are you still there? Yes, I replied, my tone flat. The call ended soon after with promises that she would make it up to me, that Ethan was ashamed but too proud to call himself. I set the phone down and stared at it as if it were another unpaid bill. That night I lay awake, turning over the timeline. Only 7 days had passed since their betrayal, and already the performance of love had returned. I thought of the blue folder in the drawer, the receipts that charted 4 years of sacrifice. Now their voices carried a different urgency. Not love, not respect, but survival. They wanted my money again, dressed in the language of family. The next morning a text from Ethan appeared. Mom, we are going through a rough patch. Emily is upset. We just need a little help with rent, only this month. Only. The word repeated like an old refrain. I did not reply. Instead, I opened the freezer, touched the cold envelope resting behind the peas, and closed the door again. The money stayed where it was. By evening the silence broke. This time a knock at the door. I did not move. Through the curtains I saw Emily's car idling at the curb, headlights on. She stood outside, phone in hand, pacing. My son sat inside the car, staring at the dashboard. He did not look at the house once. The knock came again, sharper. Susan, please. Just talk to us. We can explain. Explain. As if betrayal were a misunderstanding, as if erasing me from their wedding could be softened by excuses. I stayed in the dark until the car drove away. In the quiet that followed, the ember inside me grew hotter. I began to see clearly what I had not wanted to admit. They did not come back out of love or even guilt. They came back for the same reason they always came, for money. And for the first time in years, the thought did not make me crumble. It made me strong. That evening I sat before the mirror in my bedroom. The lamp cast a pale yellow light over the familiar lines of my face. I studied them closely, as though they belonged to a stranger. The skin sagged more than it once had, the circles beneath my eyes darker. But what unsettled me was not age. It was the weariness that had lived there for too long. For years I had tried to soften that reflection. A new cream, a careful hairstyle, a brighter dress. None of it changed the truth in my eyes. A woman who had let others feed from her hand until there was nothing left for herself. I leaned forward, searching for something I had lost. And then quietly it was there. Not softness. Not confusion. Something sharper, harder, steady as stone. For the first time in years I saw steel in my own gaze. I whispered a single word. Enough. It was not loud. Did not need to be. The sound carried weight, as though it had waited decades to be spoken. Memories rose unbidden. The years of double shifts when Ethan was a child, my body aching but my pride silent. The phone calls at midnight, the sudden requests, the way my love had always been measured in dollars instead of words. Every sacrifice had been wrapped in hope that someday, he would see me not as a purse but as a mother. And still, when the time came to choose, he had chosen Emily. He had chosen silence. He had chosen to erase me from the moment I had been waiting for since the day I first held him in my arms. I thought of the dress in the closet, the shoes, the frozen envelope. I thought of the years carved out of my life and turned into furniture, bills and promises never kept. The weight of all of it pressed down, but instead of crushing me, it forged something new. Enough. I repeated it again, testing the strength of it. Each time the word left my lips, I felt lighter. Enough of giving without respect. Enough of financing lies. Enough of being erased in silence. I straightened in the chair and pressed my palms flat against the dresser. My hands were thin, the veins raised, but they did not tremble. For once they belonged to me, not to anyone else's needs. I opened the blue folder that lived in my desk drawer, the one marked household. Page after page of receipts lay inside, proof of every favor, every transfer, every sacrifice. I read them like scripture. $500 for rent, August 12th. $900 for tires, January 5th. $260 for groceries, June 18th. The paper smelled faintly of dust and ink, but to me it smelled like truth. With each slip of paper I touched, the steel in me hardened. My life had been rewritten in numbers, in bank alerts and transfer memos. But now those same numbers were evidence. They would not shame me anymore. They would protect me. I took out a notebook and began writing. Not for them, not for a lawyer, but for myself. I listed every amount, every date, every lie attached to it. The list grew until my hand cramped, until the ink bled faintly through the paper. When I finished, I closed the notebook and placed it beside the frozen envelope. Together, they formed the beginning of something new. The house was silent, but it no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like ground cleared after a storm, ready for rebuilding. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreams. The next morning I rose early, as if summoned by the word I had whispered the night before. Enough. I dressed plainly, made coffee I barely touched, and walked to the bank. The streets were quiet, the air sharp. I felt like a soldier on her first march, steady, deliberate, without need for company. At the bank I asked to see the manager. I had known him for years. He had processed every transfer I made to Ethan and Emily. When I said I wanted all automatic payments canceled, his brows lifted in surprise. Mrs. Miller, are you sure? These transfers have been consistent for a long time. Yes, I said, my voice level. Cancel them all. Effective today. He hesitated as though waiting for me to soften, but I did not. Within minutes the forms were signed, stamped, and placed in my folder. I walked out lighter, though the weight of years still pressed on my shoulders. I thought that would be the end of it, my quiet decision, my quiet freedom. But that evening came the first retaliation. The doorbell rang just after dark. Through the window I saw Emily step onto my porch, her smile brittle. Ethan trailed behind, his face closed. With them came a man in a dark suit, briefcase in hand. They entered without waiting for an invitation. Emily spoke first, her voice dripping with practiced concern. Susan, we are worried about you. You have been making strange decisions lately. The man opened his case and spread my documents across the table. My bank statements, photocopies of receipts, even letters I had written years ago. Ethan stood silently behind him, not meeting my eyes. Mom, he began finally, his tone rehearsed. We want to help you manage your money. Things have been confusing for you. We are here to make sure you are safe. Safe. The word chilled me. It was not an offer. It was a move forward, a step into my life with their hands reaching for the strings. I sat down at the table opposite them. Emily leaned in, touching my arm with false tenderness. You do not need to worry anymore. We will handle the accounts. Mr. Fisher here has drawn up the documents. The man in the suit slid papers toward me. I read the heading Power of Attorney. I looked up slowly. You want me to sign this? Emily smiled as though it were the most natural thing in the world. It is just for convenience. We can take care of bills, make sure you are not stressed. At your age, it is normal to want help. Ethan added softly, it would mean a lot to us, Mom. We do not want you overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. I thought of the years I had juggled jobs, bills, and Ethan's needs without complaint. Overwhelmed had never broken me. But now they used it as a weapon. I tapped the papers once, then pushed them back across the table. No. The word startled even me with its firmness. Emily's smile faltered. Susan, do not be stubborn. This is for your protection. No, I repeated. My money is my responsibility. The lawyer shifted in his chair. Mrs. Miller, refusing help can sometimes be a sign of confusion. If your children are concerned, they have the right to intervene legally. For a moment silence stretched. I felt the echo of old habits urging me to explain, to defend, to soften. But I stayed still, my face calm. You are in my house, I said finally, my voice low. Gather your things and leave. Emily's eyes flared with anger. Ethan looked down again, silent as stone. They gathered their papers slowly, as though dragging out the moment of pressure. At the door, Emily turned back. You are making a mistake. We only want to help. I did not answer. I closed the door firmly behind them, locking it twice. In the silence that followed, my hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, the aftershock of standing ground I had once abandoned too easily. I sat at the table where their papers had lain and placed my notebook there instead. My evidence, my truth. The pressure had begun. But for the first time I felt ready. After that night, I understood with a cold certainty. They would not stop. People who learn to live off others rarely accept the first refusal. They retreat, they whisper behind doors, and then they come back with sharper teeth. Their silence was never peace. It was preparation. I decided I would no longer wait for their next move. The following morning I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. Carter, recommended quietly by a neighbor whose own nephew had once tried to strip her of her savings. He is discreet, she told me. He knows this kind of thing too well. That was enough. His office was downtown. A modest brick building with a brass plaque by the door. Inside, the space was spare. No glossy magazines, no distractions, only shelves lined with well-used law books and a desk free of clutter. He welcomed me in with a steady hand and eyes that told me I did not need to explain shame. He had seen it before. I told him everything. I began with the secret wedding. The way Emily had smiled as she said the words. The way Ethan stood silent like a shadow. I told him about the 4 years, the $44,000, the endless transfers and receipts. I told him about the visit with the man in the suit who had spread my documents across my table, as if they already belonged to him. He did not interrupt, only nodded occasionally, his pen moving steadily across a yellow pad. When I finished, my throat dry. He adjusted his glasses and said in a low, deliberate tone, Mrs. Miller, what you are describing is a textbook case of attempted financial exploitation. If they push further, they may try to declare you legally incompetent. Once that happens, they can petition for guardianship and seize your assets. The word incompetent struck like a slap. I had run my household, raised a child alone, worked for 40 years, and kept meticulous order. But they wanted to reduce all of it to a weakness. Hearing him name their plan made the fog clear. I reached into my bag and handed him the blue folder I had carried for weeks. He opened it carefully. Inside were receipts, bank statements, transfer confirmations, and my handwritten notes. Rent payments, grocery bills, car repairs, emergencies that had arrived with mechanical regularity. He examined them slowly. You kept everything, he said. I thought it was habit, I replied. Now I think it was instinct. He closed the folder and tapped it gently. This will protect you. Fate, or perhaps simple human decency, soon placed another piece of truth in my hands. 2 days later, at the pharmacy where I picked up my regular medication, the pharmacist called me aside. I had known him for years. He had watched me age from middle to old, had seen my prescriptions change from vitamins to blood pressure pills. His face was troubled. Susan, I need to tell you something, he began cautiously. I felt my chest tighten. What is it? Emily came in last week. She asked me to sign a statement saying you were on strong psychiatric medication. She said it was urgent, that it was for your safety. The room swayed. My voice was barely a whisper. And did you? He shook his head firmly, almost angrily. Of course not. I told her I could not falsify medical records. But she pressed. She even offered to write the statement herself and have me sign it. I refused. I thought you should know. I stood frozen, my hand gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. So this was their plan. Not only to seize my money but to build a case that my mind was failing. They would stand in court and hold up a false paper as proof. I thanked him, my voice trembling, and walked out into the sharp air. For the first time in weeks, anger burned hotter than grief. I returned to Mr. Carter with this new piece of evidence. He listened quietly, then set down his pen with deliberate calm. This strengthens your case. Their behavior is not only manipulative, it is criminal. We will act quickly. I will arrange for an independent psychiatric evaluation. Not because you need it, but because once it proves your competence, their scheme will collapse. The evaluation was scheduled within days. I sat in a quiet office with a doctor whose eyes were sharp but not unkind. For nearly 2 hours I answered questions, solved small exercises, described my daily routines, and recounted the events of the past months in exact order. When it was over, he smiled faintly. You are entirely competent. More than competent. You are organized, lucid, and precise. I will prepare my full report. I carried that paper out of the building as if it were a shield forged in steel. At home, I spread my folder and the new evaluation across the dining table. For years, these papers had been silent witnesses. Now they were allies. Rent checks, grocery receipts, the note, car tires, January 5th, $600. The evaluation signed and stamped. All of it told the truth they had tried to twist. At night, when the house was quiet, I opened a separate notebook and began writing. I recorded every call, every visit, every phrase Emily used to disguise greed as concern. We are worried about you. At your age, confusion is normal. Let us protect you. I dated each entry, marked the time, described the expressions on their faces. The notebook grew quickly. Page after page, I turned their weapons into evidence. For years, silence had been my cage. Now the act of writing gave me clarity. My life, once reduced to endless payments and disappointments, was becoming a record of truth. I began to see the courtroom in my mind, not as a place of fear, but as a stage where truth would finally stand beside me. I imagined Emily with her tears, Ethan with his silence, their lawyer with his briefcase. And then I imagined the folder, the pharmacist, the evaluation, the ledger of receipts. Against that, their rehearsed lies would crumble. For decades, I had been a woman who endured. I had swallowed humiliation, buried anger, paid bills in silence. But the papers on my table told a different story now. They had tried to create a picture of me as frail, confused, unfit. Yet every receipt, every note, every precise calculation said otherwise. The facts belonged to me. The day of the hearing came heavy and gray. I had not slept much. I sat at my kitchen table before sunrise, the blue folder open in front of me, its contents arranged in strict order. Receipts, bank statements, copies of transfers, my notebook with its careful dates, the evaluation signed by Dr. Harris. I touched each page as though steadying soldiers before a battle. For years those papers had been silent witnesses. Now they were my defense. At the courthouse, the marble floors echoed under my shoes. The walls smelled of old wood and dust. People passed by, their voices hushed, their eyes on their own burdens. Mr. Carter was waiting outside the courtroom. He gave me a brief nod, not of encouragement but of recognition. He knew the weight of what I carried. Remember, he said softly, you do not need to perform. You only need to tell the truth. The rest will reveal itself. Inside, the room was small, almost plain. Wooden benches, a raised platform where the judge would sit, and 2 long tables. At one I sat beside Mr. Carter. At the other, Ethan and Emily waited with their lawyer, Mr. Fisher. Emily wore pale colors, her makeup careful, her hair arranged in soft waves. She looked like innocence itself, but her eyes darted with calculation. Ethan wore a navy suit I recognized as one I had once paid for. He kept his gaze low, his hands clasped, his silence already rehearsed. The judge entered. We all stood, then sat as the proceedings began. Mr. Fisher spoke first. His voice was steady, professional, carrying the rhythm of a man who had done this many times before. Your Honor, we are here today out of deep concern for Mrs. Miller. She has demonstrated erratic financial behavior, cutting off support she had provided for years, refusing calls, ignoring her children, and making decisions inconsistent with her past generosity. We believe she is no longer fully capable of managing her affairs and requires guardianship for her protection." Emily dabbed her eyes delicately. Her voice trembled as she added, "Susan has always been like a mother to me, but recently she forgets things, makes rash choices. We only want to help her. We are worried for her safety." Ethan nodded slowly, as if confirming a sad truth. Their lies filled the air, rehearsed to perfection. But then Mr. Carter rose. His voice was firm, cutting clean through their performance. "Your Honor, what you have heard is not concern but manipulation. We will show that Mrs. Miller is fully competent, that she has been targeted not out of love but out of greed. We will present evidence of attempted financial exploitation." He began with the psychiatric report. Dr. Harris, a man of calm authority, testified first. "I conducted a full evaluation of Mrs. Miller. She is entirely competent. Her memory, judgment, and reasoning are all intact. In fact, her meticulous records suggest a clarity of mind stronger than many individuals her age. There is no basis to claim otherwise." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Emily's hand froze mid-gesture. Ethan's eyes flickered up for a moment, then dropped again. Next came the pharmacist, Mr. Lewis. He shifted uncomfortably on the witness stand but spoke with quiet conviction. "Emily asked me to sign a document stating Mrs. Miller was prescribed heavy psychiatric medication. It was untrue. She pressed me, insisted it was urgent. I refused. She even offered to write the statement herself and have me sign it. I could not. It would have been false." The judge's eyes sharpened. Emily bent her head, shredding the tissue in her hands into tiny pieces. Then it was my turn. My steps to the witness stand felt heavy, but once seated, the weight lifted. I swore to tell the truth, and I did. I spoke of 4 years, $44,000. I listed the rent, the groceries, the tires, the medical bills, the emergencies that came with clockwork regularity. I explained my blue folder, my notebook filled with dates and amounts, my habit of writing everything down. I described the night they came with their lawyer, spreading my papers across my table as though they already belonged to them. Mr. Carter asked one question that landed like a stone in still water. "Mrs. Miller, when was the last time your son called you without asking for money?" The silence that followed was absolute. Emily's mouth opened, but no words emerged. Ethan stared at the floor as if he wished it would open beneath him. The room waited, and the silence itself became the answer. I looked at them both and spoke the words that had lived in my chest for weeks. "You wanted to declare me incompetent so you could take my money. Ethan, you are no longer my son. You are a debtor, not family." The words were steady, not shouted, but they struck harder than any cry. The judge spoke at last, his tone firm, measured. "The petition is dismissed. Mrs. Miller is fully competent. The court finds no evidence of incapacity. Furthermore, the court cautions the petitioners that continued attempts to interfere in her financial affairs may constitute elder financial abuse and could be subject to prosecution." The gavel struck. The sound was final. Emily broke into loud tears, her voice rising in protest. Ethan remained stone still, his silence now not rehearsed but real. Mr. Fisher gathered his papers quickly, his practiced composure slipping. The masks they had worn, their show of concern, their false tenderness, had cracked beyond repair. I rose, my folder clutched against me. As I passed their table, Emily whispered harshly through her tears, "We only wanted to help." But her words were empty, stripped of power. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool, the light sharp. For a moment I stood on the steps, the noise of the city moving around me. Mr. Carter shook my hand, his grip firm. "You did more than hold your ground," he said. "No," I replied. "The evidence did." For years I had endured quietly, believing sacrifice was love, believing silence was safety. But in that room it was not endurance that saved me. It was truth, written down, documented, undeniable. They had tried to paint me as weak, confused, unfit. But the evidence revealed them as what they were. The unmasking had not been loud, nor dramatic. It had been steady, factual, inevitable. On the courthouse steps, folder in my arms, I felt the air fill my lungs with a clarity I had not known in years. They had sought to bury me under lies. Instead, their own lies had buried them. The battle was finished. The truth had spoken. After the courtroom, life did not change in a burst. There was no applause, no triumphant music, no sudden erasure of pain. Change came slowly, in the way I moved through my house, the way I looked at my own reflection, the way silence began to feel like peace rather than punishment. The first decision I made was practical. I sold the house. It was too large for one woman, too full of ghosts. Every room carried memories of money leaving my hands. The dining table where I once spread envelopes for Ethan's rent. The sofa where Emily had sat cross-legged, scrolling through her phone, while I wrote another check. The hallway where I waited for calls that never came unless they were about bills. The house was not a home. It was a vault that had been raided. With Mr. Carter's guidance, I handled the sale carefully. The proceeds went into accounts they could never touch. I found a modest apartment downtown, with 2 bright windows and a balcony overlooking the city. When I signed the lease, the agent asked, "Will it just be you?" I answered, "Yes, just me." The words carried no sorrow, only freedom. The second decision I made was to live differently. For years I had postponed myself. I had not traveled because Ethan needed a deposit. I had not bought a painting set because Emily wanted a new couch. I had not joined community groups because my schedule revolved around their emergencies. That time was over. I bought paints and brushes. At first my hand shook, unsteady, but soon colors spread across canvas in strokes that were clumsy yet honest. I painted flowers, city skylines, even the pink dress that still hung in the closet. It was no longer a symbol of rejection. On canvas, it became a study in color, stripped of its burden. I traveled. Nothing extravagant, only trips I had long delayed. A week in Maine by the sea, a bus ride to New York to visit museums, a short flight to Chicago to see my sister Diana. Each time I boarded a train or a plane, I thought of the many tickets I had never bought because someone else's rent had come first. Now the seat belonged to me. I found new friends. At an art class downtown, women my age shared their own stories. Some had been widowed, some abandoned, some betrayed by their own children. We laughed gently at the familiarity of it all. One said, "We give everything, and then we realize we are empty." Another answered, "The trick is to fill ourselves again." I nodded. Half of the money from the house I donated to organizations that protect the elderly from family exploitation. I sat with their directors, read their reports, learned how many people endured what I had endured in silence. Signing the donation check gave me more satisfaction than any transfer to Ethan ever had. This was money turned into armor for others, not fuel for entitlement. I never heard from Ethan and Emily again. People whispered that they had moved into a cramped apartment, that Ethan had finally found steady work, that Emily was seen complaining about bills at the grocery store. I did not confirm these stories. Their lives no longer belonged to me. One evening I stood on my balcony, the city lights spread before me. Cars moved below, their headlights threading through the streets. The air carried the faint smell of rain. I leaned on the railing and felt the quiet around me, not empty, not threatening, but mine. For decades I had been a woman whose love was measured in dollars. Now I was a woman whose boundaries defined her peace. I had lost illusions, but I had gained clarity. The pink dress still hangs in my closet. I do not hide it or throw it away. It is not a wound anymore. It is a reminder that love cannot be bought, that silence is not safety, and that truth always comes to light. As I turned to go inside, I heard laughter from the apartment next door. A child's voice, high and clear, followed by a mother's gentle reply. The sound did not wound me. It soothed me. Life continues. Love continues. But this time I will meet it on my terms. And so my evenings end not with fear of the phone ringing, not with envelopes hidden in freezers, but with the glow of the city and the quiet certainty that my life is finally mine.